All our great deals and our lifetime edge, you may have to clone yourself to appreciate all the savings. Oarsman Chantilly Toyota. Let's ride together.
Good morning, America. This morning, the latest on the investigation into that school shooting in Texas. New details about the massacre at Santa Fe High School. Did a spurned advance spark the rampage?
He just shoots everyone, and she was the first one.
FBI informant. Did the agency infiltrate the Trump campaign? The president's calling for the release or review of documents held by the Justice Department. We have the reaction this morning.
Mountain lion attack a biker killed outside of Seattle. Is this giant cat the killer? A second biker, also a victim.
He had his whole entire head in the jaws of this animal.
How he got away with his life.
Fiery flow, the red-hot river of lava snaking across a swath of Hawaii's Big Island, threatening more homes. Now the National Guard's warning of additional evacuations.
And here this morning, the royal party. Harry and Meghan stepping out for their glamorous nighttime wedding reception, heading off in style. The celebrities joining in, the evening ending with a bang.
Live from ABC News in New York, this is Good Morning America.
We're well. Hey, good morning, everybody. Very happy to have Diane Macedo here on the desk on a Sunday morning because Paula is in Windsor, right outside Windsor Castle, where she's been following every detail of the royal wedding. Paula, the royals and their friends, and including a lot of celebrities, were out partying overnight. Tell us about it.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Diane. Everybody, I missed you back in studio back there in New York. But as Bishop Curry said in his sermon, 2 young people fell in love and we all showed up. Well, we all showed up, but we didn't all get an invite. Only a select few were invited to the exclusive evening reception. That is where Harry and Meghan were headed in this E-Type Jaguar, a party which was hosted by his father, Prince Charles. Just 200 were invited to this exclusive event. We are hearing that Meghan spoke. The evening was then capped by a festive fireworks display. We're going to tell you all about it coming up on the show, as well as where the couple is headed on this Sunday morning. Dan?
That Jaguar is incredible. Paula, thank you very much.
It is pretty awesome, isn't it?
It is. Rob and Ron are salivating. We're going to have much more from you a little bit later in the show in a few moments. But we do need to start here with a very different and much more somber ceremony.
That's right. Look at these pictures out of Santa Fe, Texas. Just a day after that horrifying school shooting, members of the high school baseball team hold a vigil before the game. The coach writing the initials of the victims on his arm.
And one of the students, the young man who you're going to see on the right hand of your screen here, his name is Rome Schubert. He was actually grazed by a bullet on the back of his head coming out to play. Nonetheless.
Yeah, a show of strength as we learn much more about the alleged shooter, including startling new details from the mother of one of the young women who died in that attack. ABC's Marcus Moore is there in Santa Fe. Marcus, good morning.
Diane and Dan, good morning. The school just behind me will remain closed at least through Tuesday as this investigation enters a new phase and this community begins the process of trying to heal. New details are emerging this morning in the investigation into Friday's deadly shooting at this small-town high school.
Everybody needs to clear out this way.
Overnight, students returning to the school for their belongings as investigators continue combing for clues. Eyewitnesses say the teenage suspect, Demetrius Bagorchis, entered from the back of the school, armed with 2 guns, and authorities say explosive devices, including CO2 cartridges wrapped with duct tape, a pressure cooker with a timer, and a Molotov cocktail, but none of those devices worked. Still, 10 people died, 8 students and 2 teachers.
I just don't get it. I don't understand why. Why would he do that?
This grieving mother's 16-year-old daughter, Shayna Fisher, among the 10 killed at Santa Fe High School. Law enforcement officials say they haven't determined what allegedly sent the 17-year-old suspect on a deadly rampage. However, Sadie Rodriguez says Demetrius had been pursuing her daughter Shayna for several months, and that Shayna's rejection made her a target.
He had been coming on to her and making advances, and she kept telling him no.
And not even a week later, he just shoots everyone, and she was the first one.
But according to the suspect's attorneys, the idea that their client may have been motivated by a grudge is pure speculation.
As that goes, as far as a purported motivation for the crime, I would say no.
This morning, 12 people are still recovering in the hospital, among them Santa Fe ISD police officer John Barnes, who's being called a hero.
They're having a shooting at the high school, have an officer down, shooter not in custody.
Barnes, a former Houston police officer, was shot and suffered critical injuries. Friend and fellow law enforcement officer Captain Jimmy Dale said Barnes nearly died, but is expected to survive, yet he still cannot speak.
He doesn't want to be called a hero, and his wife said he's going to hate this, but he is.
There are several vigils planned for later today and the funeral for one of the students who passed away here. But Diane and Dan, the family of the suspect, they released a statement saying they are shocked and confused by what happened, and they extended their heartfelt prayers and condolences to all of the victims.
I bet so many in that town feel that way. Marcus, thank you. And we move on now to President Trump doubling down on unsupported claims that an intelligence informant was spying on his campaign.
The president on Twitter calling for action now. George Stephanopoulos is standing by with analysis, but we're going to start here with ABC's David Wright, who's at the White House. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan and Diane. It's still not clear whether the reports of an FBI mole inside the Trump campaign is a tempest in a teapot or, as the president himself has suggested, something that's potentially bigger than Watergate. But the story is gaining steam, in part with the president's help. This weekend, President Trump tweeted, if the FBI or DOJ was infiltrating a campaign for the benefit of another campaign, that is a really big deal, adding that only the release or review of documents held by the Justice Department will set the record straight. Trump's own FBI director has balked at sharing sensitive documents with the House Intelligence Committee, citing national security.
The day that we can't protect human sources is the day the American people start becoming less safe.
Revealing a source's identity, he warned, could put American lives at risk. That hasn't stopped some news organizations from speculating. According to published reports, a confidential informant did meet with several key Trump advisors during the 2016 campaign, after the FBI received evidence of suspicious contact with the Russians. Trump's lawyer used the issue to hammer the Mueller probe.
I think we're going to have to look into whether we can challenge the legitimacy of the entire investigation. Maybe a special prosecutor, special counsel never should have been appointed.
But a day later, Rudy Giuliani admitted the president doesn't know for sure if there was a spy on his campaign.
The reporting corroborates what people have told us off the record. You don't know if they're right or not.
All of this would have been long before Robert Mueller took over the Russia investigation, but the president and his allies are fanning this controversy even as there are new developments in the Mueller investigation. Today, the New York Times reports of another possible Trump Tower meeting, this one between Don Jr. He reportedly met with an Israeli social media specialist as well as a representative of two wealthy Arab princes offering to mount a campaign in support of Donald Trump's candidacy, a social media campaign. This is potentially significant because it would, if it checks out, it would mean that it's not just Russian meddling we're talking about here, but other countries trying to meddle as well. Dan and Diane?
So much to talk about here, David. Thank you. As promised, let's bring in ABC News chief anchor George Stephanopoulos, who's going to be hosting this week a little bit later this morning.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with the story about the FBI quote-unquote informant. What's your take?
Well, I think the word you just used is an important one, informant, not mole inside the campaign. The reporting from what we know is that there was an informant for the FBI who had conversations with members of the Trump campaign, George Papadopoulos, one of them, Carter Page, another one of them. Not someone inside the campaign, not someone embedded in the campaign, but a longtime source for the FBI who's worked on several other investigations, who also served as an informant, had these conversations with members of the Trump campaign. From what's been reported, it seems like these conversations were relatively unexceptionable. Hard to know what came of them, but from what's been reported so far, it seemed like he was pumping both Carter Page and George Papadopoulos for information and may not have gotten all that much.
But the way they're playing it, the way the Trump team is playing it, does it strike you as good strategy in terms of sowing doubt about whether this the whole investigation has a rotten root?
Well, whether it's good or not, it's not for me to judge, but I can say that it is clear now that the strategy of President Trump and his legal team is to raise questions about Robert Mueller, is to sow doubt about Robert Mueller, and this certainly feeds into that. I'm just trying to establish what's true and what's not true here. What's been reported, what we know about what's been reported is that there was an informant for the FBI who has not been revealed, not a mole embedded in the campaign.
And George, we heard David refer to that New York Times report about Donald Trump Jr. meeting with other foreigners offering to help the Trump campaign. How significant is that?
Depends on what happened inside that meeting. If you talk to Donald Trump Jr.'s attorney, who's quoted in the piece as well, who says that he had this meeting, nothing came of it. The emissaries also, some of the emissaries also say that nothing came of it. In fact, the Israeli social media expert says that he did not do work for the Trump campaign. Now, the New York Times also reports, though, that a $2 million payment was made from the emissary of the Gulf nations to that Israeli social media company after the campaign. I think one of the big questions that Robert Mueller is going to have to determine is, what was that $2 million payment for? Was it indeed for help to the Trump campaign? That is the big question.
A big question this morning among many. George, thank you. And I want to remind everybody, George has a big show. As always this morning, as mentioned, he's going to go one-on-one with the Lieutenant Governor of Texas for the latest details on that deadly shooting in Santa Fe.
Plus, he'll also speak with parents who lost children in the Parkland and Newtown shootings for their response to this latest school tragedy and what comes next. That's coming up on This Week right here on ABC. We move on now to a fiery speech at the Cannes Film Festival. Asia Argento, an Italian actress and director, speaking out at the very festival where she says she was raped by disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein.
ABC's Ariel Reshef is covering the story. Ariel, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan and Diane. Asia Argento did not hold back as she lambasted disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. The Me Too movement, fueled by accusations of sexual misconduct against Weinstein, taking center stage in Argento's impassioned speech. Listen.
In 1997, I was raped by Harvey Weinstein here at Cannes. I was 21 years old. This festival was his hunting ground. And even tonight, sitting among you, there are those who still have to be held accountable for their conduct against women. You know who you are.
That searing speech comes 1 week after 82 women in film linked arms in silent protest. Argento later posting her entire speech on Twitter and this photo on Instagram with her fist in the air. The caption in French translated, "The battle of women continues." We want to show it to you right here. It's right behind me. So one of Weinstein's attorneys who was in the audience during Argento's remarks tells ABC News there was an equal amount of stunned silence in the hall as there was applause. The allegations by Miss Argento are completely false. This is clearly a painful time for Miss Argento, yet it is a false narrative. Mr. Weinstein only wishes Miss Argento well. We should mention Weinstein has repeatedly denied all allegations of non-consensual sex. Dan, Diane.
All right, that's Ariel Reshef for us live from the newsroom. Thanks, Ariel. And now it's time to get to some of our other news headlines. Ron Claiborne is here with a look at that.
Hi, Diane Macedo.
Hi.
Good morning to you and Dan. Robert, good morning to you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin in Hawaii, where volcanic eruptions on the Big Island seem to be ramping up again this morning. ABC's Marcy Gonzalez is on the ground there with the latest. Good morning, Marcy.
Hi, Ron. Good morning. And this fissure just keeps growing. It's fountaining more than 100 feet in the air, lighting up the sky and sending this rapid river of lava flowing down. It's now covered a highway, and for the first time since this eruption began more than 2 weeks ago, lava is now flowing into the ocean. Geologists are warning of the potential danger from the plumes that creates, saying it could send hydrochloric acid and fine particles of glass into the air. It is a part of the reason even more evacuations have been ordered, and this as we are learning of a first injury since this volcanic emergency began. You can probably hear that roaring, the booming from a fissure just down there. Well, it sent a molten rock flying towards a house. It hit a man in the leg as he sat on his balcony. We've learned he is recovering in the hospital this morning as officials keep a close eye not only on these fissures, but on the summit of Kilauea, where there was yet another ash explosion overnight. Ron?
Some amazing images there from Hawaii. Marcy, thank you for that report. And in Pasadena, Texas, near Houston, a massive explosion at a chemical plant injured more than 20 people Saturday morning. 2 of the injured suffering serious burns. They had to be airlifted to the hospital. Fire officials there say a blown valve caused a flash fire, which is being blamed for the explosion. And in Cuba, investigators are now examining the flight data recorder from that plane that crashed and killed 113 people, at least 113 people. The plane crashing and erupting into a fireball just after takeoff from Havana Airport. 3 survivors, incredibly, were pulled from the wreckage. They reported to be clinging to life. And in Lynchburg, Virginia, former President Jimmy Carter delivered this year's commencement address at Liberty University, poking a little fun at last year's speaker, Donald Trump. Check it out.
This is a wonderful crowd. Jerry told me before we came here that it's even bigger, I hate to say this, than it was last year.
That quip, of course, alluding to the administration's claims that the Trump inauguration crowd was the largest ever. Carter went on to call discrimination against women and girls the greatest human rights problem in the world. And finally, Baltimore at the racetrack went down to the wire at the Preakness Stakes. Kentucky Derby winner Justified, Matt Dowd's choice, racing through the fog and on a muddy course, sloppy course there, taking the win. Check it out, beating a field of 8 other thoroughbreds to capture the second jewel of horse racing's Triple Crown. Bravazzo was second by half a length. Next up for Justify, the Belmont Stakes in just less than 3 weeks on June 9th, vying to be the 13th horse to win all 3 jewels in the Triple Crown. 36 horses, I believe, have gone to the Belmont, having won the first 2, 12 of 1. Let's see if Justify will be the next.
What are they saying? Are they what are they saying over at the OTB where you hang out?
Well, Justify will certainly be the favorite, but look. 1.5 miles at the Belmont, that's tough. That's why they call it the test of champions.
A lot of people, no doubt, crossing their fingers for rainy, muddy weather because he seems to do very well in that.
Very good, real mutter there.
Rob, you're going to help them out
2 races in a row. We'll see if it'll be the Triple Crown of sloppy tracks come Belmont in early June. It's been sloppy across much of the Northeast, actually the East Coast, for the past week. We've been stuck in this weather pattern, and these are some of the scenes that we've had outside of Virginia, just about an hour outside of Richmond, Virginia, where flooding an issue there. D.C., our nation's capital, the past 7 days, every day, at least a 1/4 inch of rain. I haven't seen that sort of streak of weather, wet weather, ever, or at least on record. Also had a mudslide, sadly, in Polk County, North Carolina. There was one fatality with this image here, so the saturated soil for sure, and we've got more rain coming at least today across parts of the southeast, and some of that mud getting into some of the homes there. All right, here we go. Showers and storms down across the southeast, a couple leftover showers across the northeast, then drier air coming in. We had some severe weather yesterday across parts of the plains, one tornado touching down across parts of northern Oklahoma. Today, the strong storms will be across the mid-Mississippi River Valley, getting into Louisville. Maybe some hail and some gusty winds with this, and again, the humidity will be trapped across the deep south, and more rain, it looks like, for the Sunshine State, at least the northern part of it in Florida. Temperatures today, though, bouncing back into the lower 80s across the northeast, even with the front coming through late in the day, and then warm and humid and kind of soupy down across parts of the south. 66 degrees in San Diego, a little bit drier there with that Mediterranean climate. That's a quick check on the national headlines. Time now for your local forecast.
Well, it's a warm and humid afternoon with our highs in the mid-80s. Some sunshine finally set to return, the heavy rain winding down. A little bit more clouds this afternoon, maybe an isolated shower or thunderstorm popping in. If you're heading out to Nationals Park, it's a mostly dry game for that first pitch at 1:35. Overnight tonight, temperatures in the mid-60s under partly cloudy conditions. And as we start the early half of the week, we'll start out with some clouds and temperatures in the low 70s, building into the upper 70s by the afternoon.
I'm told it's 3 weeks until the Belmont Stakes, so that's outside of
yeah, is it going to rain that day?
That's out of my forecast range at this point.
Wow,
Come on, man.
My grandmother, God bless her heart, and God rest her soul, brought me to Belmont when I was 15 years old and introduced me to a racetrack, racing.
Good
she had
habits.
a bit of a gambling problem, but you know, yeah, it's all in good fun.
Does that mean you know who we should bet on?
Yes.
Does it give you any tips?
This just really opens up such a window. Ron still owes me $20 from last year. Hey, let's turn back now to the royal wedding and the celebrations after the I-dos.
That's right. Harry and Meghan partied into the night with their closest family and friends at an evening reception. And let's go back out to Paula in Windsor, England, just outside the castle. Paula, sounds like a great time.
It was. And what's better than one reception, you guys?
3.
I'm waiting.
3.
2. Oh, okay, not 3. 2 receptions, Ron. At that earlier afternoon afternoon reception, Elton John performed several songs, and Harry reportedly gave a really emotional speech talking about his new bride. But at that exclusive evening reception where just 200 people were invited, Meghan Markle broke from tradition and spoke to her closest friends and family in the room, one of many moments where we saw flashes of Princess Diana.
It's what fairy tales are made of. The royal newlyweds ending their night at the evening reception with a dazzling fireworks display. It was all smiles as the couple departed Windsor Castle hand in hand earlier that night. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex heading to Frogmore House for